The weight on his chest told Danny Martinez something had gone terribly wrong before he even opened his eyes. His last memory was stumbling into what he thought was his assigned quarters on the human delegation ship after 16 hours straight of emergency repairs to the cooling system. The bed had been soft, the lights were dim, and he'd collapsed without checking the room number. Now something breathed against his neck with a rhythm that felt too slow, too measured. Danny's eyes snapped open to find himself staring at scaled skin the color of deep amethyst barely 3 inches from his face. The creature's head rested on his shoulder, one clawed hand draped across his chest. 4 elegant horns curved back from her skull, and even in sleep she radiated an otherworldly grace that made his heart hammer against his ribs. He recognized her immediately. Everyone in the human fleet knew what Queen Vexara looked like. The Zathrian Empress had traveled across 3 sectors to meet with humanity's representatives, and the entire diplomatic mission hinged on making a good impression. The alliance of starfaring species had made it clear that humanity's petition for membership would succeed or fail based on this single meeting. Danny's mind raced through 1,000 terrible scenarios. He was a mechanic, not a diplomat. He wore grease-stained coveralls, not formal attire. And he was currently in bed with the most powerful being in 4 star systems. Moving seemed like a catastrophically bad idea, but staying put felt even worse. He tried to shift his weight slowly, carefully, but the Queen's eyes opened in an instant. They were golden with vertical pupils, and they fixed on him with an intensity that froze him in place. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then Vexara's expression shifted from confusion to something Danny couldn't quite read. She didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with those luminous eyes. "You are not Ambassador Chen," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality that seemed to vibrate in his chest. "No, Your Majesty, I'm really not." Danny's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "I'm Danny Martinez. I fix things. Cooling systems, mainly. I think I took a wrong turn." The Queen's lips curved into what might have been amusement. "A wrong turn that led you into the royal quarters, past my guards, and into my private chambers? I was exhausted. I thought this was Deck 7, Section C. I didn't even look at the door." The excuse sounded pathetic even to his own ears. Vexara sat up slowly, the silken sheets falling away to reveal armor-like scales that covered her shoulders and arms. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "My attendants prepared this room with specific atmospheric conditions, the scent of jasmine from your earth, the temperature precisely calibrated for human comfort. They expected Ambassador Chen to accept my invitation for private discussion." The implication hit Danny like a physical blow. This wasn't just any room. This was a prepared meeting space, and he'd stumbled into what was clearly meant to be a significant diplomatic moment. "I should go," he said, starting to move. "Stay." The command in her voice was absolute. "My guards will have already alerted both our security forces. If you leave this room now, you will be intercepted, questions will be asked, and assumptions will be made. Some of those assumptions may be very dangerous for your species' application to the Alliance." Danny froze halfway out of the bed. What kind of assumptions? That humanity sent an imposter, that you are an assassin, that this was a deliberate insult. Vexara stood, her full height nearly 7 feet, and walked to a communications panel on the wall, or worse, that I have rejected your ambassador in favor of a mechanic, which would humiliate your delegation and destroy any chance of productive negotiation. "So, what do we do?" The Queen turned back to him, and for the first time, Danny saw something almost playful in her expression. "We find a way to turn this accident into an advantage. Tell me, Danny Martinez, who fixes cooling systems, do you know why humanity's petition has faced such resistance in the Alliance?" He shook his head, feeling completely out of his depth. "Because the other species fear you. Not your weapons or your ships, but your unpredictability, your chaos, your tendency to break every rule and somehow survive. She moved closer, her golden eyes locked on his. Perhaps this accident is exactly the kind of proof I needed. Show me why humans deserve a seat at the table. Danny's mouth went dry as he realized that his career-ending mistake might have just become humanity's strangest diplomatic opportunity. But before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and he knew their time for private conversation had just run out. Danny's training kicked in before conscious thought. The alarm pattern was specific. 3 short bursts followed by 2 long ones. Hull breach on the lower decks. His hands moved automatically, reaching for tools that weren't there. Muscle memory from hundreds of emergency drills taking over. "That's not a security alarm," he said, already moving toward the door. "Something's venting atmosphere on the maintenance level." Queen Vexara's hand shot out, catching his arm with surprising strength. "You will not leave this room during an emergency. My guards will assume you caused it. If nobody fixes it in the next 4 minutes, 30 people will suffocate." Danny met her eyes, and something in his expression made her hand loosen. "I'm not letting people die because I'm worried about politics." The Queen studied him for a heartbeat, then touched a panel on her wrist. She spoke in her own language, the words flowing like water over stones. The door hissed open, revealing 2 massive guards in powered armor, their weapons already raised. Vexara spoke again, her tone commanding. The guards exchanged glances but lowered their weapons. "I told them you were with me," she said. "They will escort us to the breach." "Us?" Danny was already running, but he glanced back in surprise. "Did you think I became queen by hiding during emergencies?" Vexara moved with fluid grace, easily keeping pace despite her formal robes. "Show me how humans handle chaos." They reached the maintenance deck in 90 seconds, Danny taking stairs 3 at a time while the Queen flowed behind him like liquid shadow. The breach was exactly where he expected, the old junction point where human construction met Zathrian retrofit. He'd warned the chief engineer about stress fractures 3 days ago, but the repair had been scheduled for after the diplomatic meetings. People were scrambling, some already putting on emergency suits, others sealing bulkhead doors. But Danny saw the real problem immediately. The automatic systems were trying to seal the breach with foam, but the foam wasn't bonding to the Zathrian metal. Different molecular structure, different temperature tolerance. The gap was small now, but growing as atmosphere screamed through it. "I need a welding torch, a sheet of durasteel, and someone to hold it in place while I work," Danny shouted over the alarm. A young engineer named Katie Sullivan appeared with the torch, her hands shaking. "The durasteel is 2 sections over. We'll never get it here in time." Danny looked around desperately, then his eyes landed on a decorative wall panel. Zathrian metal, already temperature compatible with their hull. "We need that panel. That's part of the gift art the Zathrians installed," Katie protested. "It's worth more than our entire ship. It'll be worth nothing if we're all dead." Danny was already prying it loose, his fingers finding the release mechanisms by touch alone. Queen Vexara stepped forward, her claws extending. She dug them into the panel's edge and pulled. The metal groaned and came free in one piece, just the right size to cover the breach. "Hold it here," Danny instructed. And to his amazement, the Queen of the Zathrian Empire pressed herself against the wall, holding the panel steady while atmosphere shrieked around them. The welding torch felt natural in Danny's hands. He'd done this 1,000 times in training, maybe 100 times in real emergencies, but never with alien royalty acting as his assistant, and never with the future of humanity's alliance membership hanging in the balance. The first pass of the torch sealed the top edge. The shrieking dropped in pitch. Second pass on the left side, working fast but careful, knowing that a weak seal would fail under pressure. Queen Vexara didn't flinch as sparks showered across her scaled arms, didn't move a muscle even though the heat must have been intense. Why did you warn them about the fracture? She asked, her voice calm despite the chaos. 3 days ago. Submitted a repair request. Danny moved to the right edge, the torch leaving a perfect bead of molten metal. Said it wasn't urgent enough to delay diplomatic functions. But you knew it would fail. I knew it could fail. Big difference. Bottom edge now, almost done. In engineering, you don't get to know everything. You make your best guess and prepare for the worst. The final pass completed, Danny shut off the torch and stepped back. The seal held, the alarm cut off, leaving ringing silence. Around them, the maintenance crew stared in disbelief at the sight of their repair tech and the Zathrian Queen covered in metal dust and scorch marks. Vexara released the panel slowly, examining the weld with professional interest. Your best guess saved lives today. Our best guess, Danny corrected. You held it steady. That weld wouldn't exist without you. The Queen's expression shifted to something Danny was starting to recognize as approval, but before either could speak, the sound of rapid footsteps announced the arrival of Ambassador Richard Chen, flanked by security officers from both species. Chen's face was red, his formal robes askew from running. Your Majesty, I cannot apologize enough for this breach of protocol. This man had no authorization to be in your quarters, and his presence during this emergency is a clear violation of security procedures. Ambassador Chen, Vexara said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. This man just saved 37 lives, including my own. His presence in my quarters was at my invitation, and his actions during the emergency were exemplary. The lie was smooth, delivered with such conviction that even Danny almost believed it. Chen's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. But the report said he was found in your private chambers without clearance? The reports are incomplete. Vexara moved to stand beside Danny, a gesture of alliance that was impossible to misinterpret. I requested a consultation with someone who understands both human and Zathrian systems. Your mechanics recommended Danny Martinez. We were discussing integration challenges when the breach occurred. Katie Sullivan, still holding the welding torch, nodded quickly. That's right, Ambassador. Danny's been studying the interface problems for weeks. He's the best we have. It was another lie, or at least a heavy embellishment, but the other engineers picked up the thread immediately. They'd worked with Danny long enough to trust him, and if the Queen herself was vouching for his presence, they weren't about to contradict her. Chen looked between them, clearly trying to determine if he was being manipulated.
Your Majesty, perhaps we should continue this discussion in more appropriate surroundings.
The formal reception begins in 3 hours. Indeed. Vexara's golden eyes swept across the assembled crew. But first, I wish to understand more about human emergency protocols. Ambassador, your species claims to excel under pressure. Today I saw evidence of this claim. I would like to observe more before we proceed with formal negotiations. Danny felt the Queen's hand on his shoulder, her claws resting lightly against his coveralls. The message was clear to everyone present. She had chosen him as her guide to humanity, at least for now, and anyone who wanted to object would be challenging her directly. Chen's political instincts finally caught up with the situation. He smoothed his robes and produced a diplomatic smile. Of course, Your Majesty. I'm certain Danny would be honored to provide any insights you require, though perhaps he should change into more appropriate attire. No, Vexara said firmly. I have seen enough of appropriate attire and formal protocols. I wish to see how humans actually work, not how they wish to appear. Danny Martinez will continue as he is. The Queen turned and walked toward the exit, clearly expecting Danny to follow. He caught Katie's eye, and she gave him a small nod of encouragement. Whatever was happening, he was committed now. As they walked through the corridors back toward the upper decks, Vexara spoke quietly enough that only Danny could hear. You realize what just happened? You lied to your own people and mine to protect me. I created an opportunity. There is a difference. She glanced at him with those unsettling golden eyes. The Alliance questions whether humans can integrate with species who think differently, who have different values and social structures. They believe you are too rigid, too caught up in your own hierarchies. So you're using me to prove them wrong? I am giving you a chance to prove them wrong yourself. They reached a junction where corridors split toward different sections of the ship. In 3 hours, I meet with your diplomatic team. They will present carefully prepared arguments, statistics, cultural analyses, all very proper and completely unconvincing. Danny stopped walking. What would convince you? Vexara turned to face him fully, her presence filling the corridor. Truth. Show me who humans really are when the protocols fail and the plans fall apart. Show me what you do with chaos. That's a dangerous thing to ask for. Yes, the Queen agreed. But danger is the only real test of character. Your ambassador will hate this. Your security forces will resist. But I am going to spend the next 3 hours learning about your ship from you, and then I am going to make my recommendation to the Alliance based on what I discover. Danny's mind raced. This was insane. He was a mechanic, being asked to conduct diplomatic relations with no training, no preparation, no idea what he was doing. Every rule said he should refuse, should defer to Chen and the proper channels. But he thought about the fracture he'd reported 3 days ago, ignored because it wasn't convenient. He thought about the phone that couldn't bond to alien metal because nobody had tested it properly. He thought about all the small failures that accumulated when people worried more about appearances than reality. But fair warning, if you want to see how this ship really runs, some of what you'll find isn't pretty. We make mistakes, we argue. We fix things with whatever we have instead of waiting for the right parts. That, Vexara said with what Danny was now certain was a smile, is exactly what I want to see. The Alliance has 17 species, all of whom present perfect facades and hide their flaws behind diplomatic language. If humanity can be honest about its imperfections, you may be more valuable than any of them. She started walking again, and Danny followed, aware that somewhere behind them, Ambassador Chen was probably having a breakdown. But for the first time since waking up in the wrong bed, Danny felt like maybe, just maybe, he might actually survive this with his career intact. The first stop on their unplanned tour was engineering, where Danny knew he'd find his supervisor, Linda Hayes, probably still dealing with the aftermath of the breach. The main engine room hummed with controlled power, massive reactors that blended human fusion technology with Zathrian energy distribution systems. Linda looked up from a diagnostic panel, saw Danny with the Queen, and nearly dropped her tablet. Her gray hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her coveralls bore the same grease stains as Danny's. She recovered quickly, straightening to something approximating attention. "Your Majesty," she said. "This is unexpected." "Chief Engineer Hayes," Vexara acknowledged. "Your subordinate has offered to show me how this vessel operates beyond the official presentations. I hope you have no objections." Linda's eyes flicked to Danny with a look that promised a very long conversation later. "No objections, Your Majesty. Though I should mention that Danny's supposed to be sleeping after a double shift." "The sleep was interrupted," Danny said dryly. "Long story. I'm sure it is." Linda set down her tablet and crossed her arms. "What would you like to see?" Vexara moved deeper into the engineering bay, her eyes tracking the maze of conduits and power relays. This ship was built by humans but retrofitted with Zathrian components. The official reports say integration was seamless. Was it? Linda and Danny exchanged glances. The truth was complicated, but the Queen had specifically asked for honesty. "No," Linda said finally. "The Zathrian power systems are more efficient than ours by about 30%, but they operate on different principles. Our people think in terms of redundancy and brute force. Build it strong enough to handle worst-case scenarios. Your people think in terms of elegance and efficiency. Build it smart enough that worst-case scenarios don't happen. And when those philosophies conflict, we argue a lot," Danny admitted. Your engineers want to optimize everything, strip out safety margins they see as wasteful. Our engineers want backup systems for the backup systems. The breach that just happened? That was a compromise failure. Human hull, Zathrian reinforcement. But nobody thought about how the materials would interact under stress cycling. Vexera ran her clawed hand along a junction box, feeling the vibration of power flowing through it. Yet you made it work, with a decorative panel and a welding torch. That's human engineering, Linda said with a hint of pride. We're really good at improvising. Maybe not as elegant as your solutions, but we get results. The Queen turned to examine a power coupling, and Danny saw her notice something. A bundle of cables secured with what was definitely not regulation equipment. Specifically, it was held together with wire and what looked suspiciously like part of a food service tray. This is not standard, Vexara observed. Danny winced. No, Your Majesty. That's a temporary fix from 2 months ago. The proper mounting bracket was on back order, and we needed to route power to the medical bay expansion. And the temporary fix remains because it works, Linda said bluntly. The proper part arrived 5 weeks ago, but we've had higher priorities. That coupling handles the load just fine, and changing it out would require shutting down power to medical for 4 hours. We keep pushing it down the maintenance schedule. It was exactly the kind of thing that should never be admitted to during a diplomatic inspection. The kind of shortcut that made ships fail official audits. But Vexara had asked for truth, and Danny was betting their chances on her being sincere about that. The Queen was silent for a long moment, studying the makeshift repair. Then she did something Danny didn't expect. She laughed. It was a sound like chimes in wind, musical, and genuine. In the Zathrian fleet, such a solution would result in formal reprimand, she said. Engineers would be required to complete additional training on proper procedures. The ship would be docked until regulations were followed precisely. Is that better? Danny asked carefully. In some ways, yes. Our ships rarely fail unexpectedly. But they also rarely adapt to unexpected situations. Vexara moved on to the next system, her interest clearly growing. Tell me, what happens when you encounter a problem you have never seen before? Linda pulled up a maintenance log on her tablet. Last month, the environmental recyclers started producing water with a slightly wrong mineral balance. Nothing dangerous, but enough to make coffee taste terrible. Took us 3 days to figure out that Zathrian and human gut bacteria in the waste system were creating unexpected chemical reactions. How did you solve it? We didn't really, Danny said. We adjusted. Added a filtration stage that separates the products before they interact. It uses more power than your original design, but it works for a mixed crew. The Queen's golden eyes studied them both. And this solution was approved by Zathrian engineers? Eventually, Linda admitted. After about 2 weeks of arguments, they wanted to redesign the entire recycling system to eliminate the problem. We wanted to patch it and move on. We compromised on the filter. 2 weeks of arguments over water filtration, Vexara mused. The Alliance would see this as evidence that humans cannot cooperate efficiently. Danny felt his stomach sink. This was going badly. He'd been honest like she asked, but honesty was apparently proving her skeptics right. But then the Queen continued. However, I see it differently. You identified a problem, debated solutions, and implemented a working compromise while maintaining ship operations. The Alliance species would have formed a committee, studied the issue for months, and produced a perfect solution long after the crew had given up on drinking coffee. She turned to face them both, her expression serious. Perfection is the enemy of progress. The Alliance has become so focused on avoiding mistakes that we have stopped adapting. Humanity's chaos may be exactly what we need. Linda and Danny exchanged surprised glances. This was not at all where either had expected the conversation to go. Your Majesty, Linda ventured carefully, are you saying that our shortcuts and arguments and improvised fixes are actually strengths? I am saying they are different, Vexara replied. Different is not inherently better or worse, but the Alliance has 17 species who all think remarkably similarly now. We have optimized ourselves into stagnation. Perhaps humanity's refusal to fit the pattern is precisely what makes you valuable. She moved toward the exit, then paused. Continue your tour, Danny Martinez. Show me more of these imperfect solutions. I find them far more enlightening than any prepared presentation could be. As the Queen swept out into the corridor, Linda grabbed Danny's arm. What exactly is happening here? I have no idea, Danny admitted, but I think maybe we're accidentally conducting the most important diplomatic mission in human history, with improvised repairs and honest admissions of our mistakes? Apparently. Linda shook her head in disbelief. Only humans could stumble into diplomacy this way. Go. Keep her interested. And Danny? Try not to start an interstellar incident. Too late for that, Danny muttered, but he hurried after the Queen, wondering what other supposedly shameful truths about human engineering he was about to reveal. The tour continued through sections of the ship that Danny wouldn't normally show to visiting dignitaries. The hydroponics bay, where engineer Marcus Cole had installed grow lights at angles that violated about 6 different efficiency standards but produced 30% more vegetables. The recreation deck, where crew members had reprogrammed Zathrian entertainment systems to play human games, creating a bizarre hybrid of technologies that technically shouldn't work together but somehow did. At each stop, Queen Vexara asked probing questions, and Danny answered with increasing confidence. Yes, human solutions were messy. Yes, they broke rules, but they worked. And more importantly, they worked in situations where by-the-book approaches would fail. They ended up in the observation deck, a space that looked out over the docking array where both human and Zathrian ships sat in neat rows. The formal reception would begin in less than an hour, and Danny knew he should suggest that the Queen return to her prepared schedule. Instead, she spoke first. Tell me about the bed, Danny Martinez. He felt his face flush. Your Majesty, I truly did make a mistake. I was exhausted. I wasn't paying attention to deck markers. I never meant to intrude. I believe you. She turned from the viewport to study him. But I chose that particular room for a specific reason. Among my people, sharing sleeping space is a gesture of ultimate trust. It is never done casually. Danny's mouth went dry. I didn't know that. I know you didn't. That is what makes it interesting. Vexara moved closer, her presence somehow both intimidating and strangely comfortable. When I woke to find a stranger in my bed, my first instinct was to call guards to assume threat, but something stopped me. What? You were afraid, but you were not violent. Confused, but not aggressive. And when I spoke to you, you were honest about your mistake rather than attempting deception. Her golden eyes held his. These are not common traits in positions of power. Most beings would have attempted to manipulate the situation to their advantage. Bobber, I'm not in a position of power. I'm just a mechanic who got lost. Exactly. You are not a diplomat trained to say the right things. You are simply yourself, navigating chaos as best you can. Vexara gestured to the ships beyond the viewport. That is what humanity offers the Alliance. Not perfection, not elegant solutions, but authentic adaptation to whatever situations arise. Danny thought about that, about all the times he'd fixed things with whatever materials were at hand, all the arguments with engineers from other species about the right way versus the working way, about the career he'd built on being good enough instead of perfect. So what happens now? He asked. Now you attend the formal reception with me as my personal guest. Ambassador Chin will be deeply uncomfortable. Your security forces will be confused. And I will present my findings to the Alliance Council, with you standing beside me as evidence. Evidence of what? Queen Vexara's smile was knowing and slightly mischievous. Evidence that humanity, in all its chaotic imperfection, is exactly what the Alliance needs. You will hate every moment of the formal proceedings, Danny Martinez. You will say awkward things and violate protocols you don't even know exist. And that authenticity will be worth more than 1,000 perfect diplomatic presentations. She started toward the exit, then looked back. One more thing. When we enter the reception, there will be questions about why you are with me. Let me answer them. But if anyone asks you directly about what happened this day, tell them the truth. Not a diplomatic version, not a carefully edited story. The complete, chaotic, imperfect truth. That's going to make a lot of people very angry.
Yes, the Queen agreed.
But it might also make them think. And thinking, questioning, adapting. These are the things that keep civilizations alive. Danny followed her toward what would undoubtedly be the strangest and most uncomfortable few hours of his life, wearing his grease-stained coveralls to a formal diplomatic reception, about to represent humanity's case for alliance membership without any preparation or training. It was, he reflected, the most human thing he could possibly do. Take an impossible situation, improvise a solution, and trust that being genuine would somehow be enough. Whether it would actually work remained to be seen, but as they approached the reception hall and Danny saw Ambassador Chen's expression of absolute horror, he found himself almost looking forward to finding out. The reception hall had been decorated in a style meant to honor both human and Zathrian aesthetics, which in practice meant it looked like neither and satisfied no one. Crystalline sculptures from Zathria's capital world stood beside earth flowers in a combination that was technically impressive and aesthetically bizarre. The assembled guests represented 14 different alliance species, each in their formal attire, each following precise protocols that Danny was about to violate simply by existing in this space. Ambassador Chen intercepted them at the entrance, his diplomatic smile so forced it looked painful. Your Majesty, surely you would prefer to refresh yourself before the reception. We have prepared appropriate accommodations. I am quite refreshed, Ambassador. Danny Martinez has provided an excellent tour of your vessel's actual operations, as opposed to the sanitized version I would have received otherwise. Vexara's tone made it clear this was not a negotiation. Chen's eyes flicked to Danny with barely concealed fury. Perhaps Mr. Martinez would be more comfortable observing from the crew gallery rather than the main floor. Danny stays with me, the Queen said firmly. Unless you wish to directly contradict my explicit wishes, Ambassador? It was a diplomatic trap with no good escape. Chen's smile became even more strained. Of course not, Your Majesty. Mr. Jocelyn, Martinez is welcome wherever you desire his presence. As they entered the hall, conversations died like ripples spreading across water. Every eye in the room tracked Danny's grease-stained coveralls and work boots among the formal robes and ceremonial armor. He felt like a smudge on an otherwise pristine painting. A tall being with multiple arms and skin that seemed to shift between colors approached. Ambassador Chen straightened, his diplomatic instincts recognizing importance. Your Majesty, may I present Council Member Fexine of the Veros Collective. Council Member, this is Queen Vexara of Zathria. We have met, Fexin said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air vibrate, though I confess surprise at her choice of companion this evening. I was led to believe humanity sent their finest diplomats to this negotiation. They sent their finest diplomatic team, Vexara corrected. But I chose to learn from someone who actually operates the ship rather than simply manages it. This is Danny Martinez, Chief Repair Technician. He has provided more insight into human capabilities in 3 hours than I received in 3 weeks of formal briefings. Thexan's multiple eyes focused on Danny with unsettling intensity. A technician. How curious. Tell me, technician, what insight could you possibly provide about humanity's fitness for Alliance membership? Danny felt every person in the room waiting for his answer. Chen's expression promised severe consequences if Danny said the wrong thing, but Queen Vexara had told him to be honest, to be himself, and he'd already committed to this path. Honestly, sir, I have no idea if we're fit for the Alliance, Danny said. I fix cooling systems and patch hull breaches. Politics is way above my pay grade. Several beings in the crowd made sounds that might have been disapproval. Chen looked like he might faint, but Thexan's color shifted to something that Danny desperately hoped indicated interest rather than offense. "At least you are honest about your limitations," the council member said. "Most species send representatives who claim expertise in all matters. You admit you do not know. Refreshing, if undiplomatic." "That's kind of humanity's thing," Danny continued, warming to the topic despite his nerves. "We're really good at admitting we don't know stuff and then figuring it out anyway. Like today, there was a whole breach. The automatic systems couldn't fix it because they were designed for single-species construction. But we grabbed what we had available and made it work." "Made what work?" Another voice called from the crowd. This one belonged to a being that resembled an upright insect, chitinous plates gleaming. "A decorative wall panel," Danny admitted. "We ripped it off and welded it over the breach. Totally not by the book. Definitely not what it was designed for. But 37 people are still breathing because we didn't wait for the proper materials." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some beings seemed appalled at the admission of improvised repairs. Others appeared thoughtful. Queen Vexara watched it all with evident satisfaction. Ambassador Chen stepped in, trying to control the damage. "What Danny means is that humans are adaptable in crisis situations. We follow proper procedures when possible, but can innovate when necessary." "No," Danny said, surprising himself with his own boldness. "That's not what I meant. I meant we break rules constantly because the rules don't cover every situation. We argue with each other about the right way to do things. We implement solutions that barely work, and we fix them later if we have to. It's messy and chaotic, and sometimes things break, but we keep going anyway." Tepson moved closer, his shifting colors now definitely indicating interest. "You describe dysfunction, yet you seem proud of it." "I describe reality," Danny replied. "Every species here probably has their own version of this. Times when the plan failed and they had to improvise. The difference is, we're admitting it instead of pretending we have everything figured out." A murmur ran through the crowd. Queen Vexara chose that moment to speak, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Councilmember Thexan, you asked what insight a technician could provide. Here is your answer. In 3 hours, Danny Martinez showed me 17 violations of standard operating procedures aboard this vessel. 17 moments where humans chose effectiveness over protocol, results over appearance. Violations should disqualify them from membership," someone in the crowd declared. "Should they?" Vexara challenged. "How many of your own vessels operate with perfect adherence to regulations? How many times have your engineers implemented undocumented modifications that improve performance? How many times have you, Council Member Texan, made decisions that technically violated procedure because the situation demanded it?" Texan's colors shifted through several patterns before settling on what Danny hoped was respect. "You make a dangerous argument, Your Majesty. If we excuse human violations, we must excuse all violations." "No," the Queen said. "I argue that we stop pretending perfection is possible and start valuing honest adaptation instead. The Alliance has become rigid because we shame any admission of imperfection. Humanity's willingness to acknowledge their chaotic approach may be exactly what prevents that rigidity from destroying us." Another being stepped forward, this one vaguely reptilian with scales that glittered like opals. "The Zathrians have long been advocates for careful consideration and perfect execution. Your Majesty, this represents a significant shift in your position." "It represents learning," Vexara said. "I have spent this day observing how humans actually function rather than how they wish to appear. Their ship is held together with improvised repairs and arguments between engineers, yet it functions. It adapts, and when crisis occurred, they solved it not through careful planning, but through immediate action using whatever resources were available." She turned to face the full assembly. "The Alliance faces challenges we have never encountered. New species requesting membership, territorial disputes with unknown factions, technological developments that outpace our regulations. We need members who can adapt to chaos, not just maintain order. Humanity may be rough and unpredictable, but they survive situations that would paralyze more rigid species. Danny felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This entire reception, humanity's entire application to the Alliance, seemed to be balancing on what happened in the next few moments. Thexan spoke carefully, his words measured. Your Majesty, you stake your considerable reputation on this assessment. Are you truly confident that humanity's chaos is a strength rather than a fatal flaw? I am, Vexara said without hesitation. Because I have seen it in action. Because I woke this morning with Danny Martinez in my bed, an accident that could have sparked diplomatic crisis. And instead, I found opportunity. We spent the day turning disaster into advantage. Exactly as humans do. That adaptability is worth more than any amount of perfect protocol. The room erupted in conversation, species speaking in their own languages, debates breaking out across the hall. Chen looked simultaneously relieved and horrified, clearly uncertain whether this was going well or terribly.